Hey, welcome to Catholic Breakfast. I'm Father John Muir, and taking a look at Saint Augustine's amazing book, Confessions. Today, book 6, and I'll focus on how Augustine has some breakthroughs in terms of the act of knowing and how sophisticated and how marvelous the human act of knowing anything, especially faith, is. Chapter 6 of Confessions is amazing, especially for anybody who struggles with faith and thinks that faith is being gullible or being credulous, believing things on blind faith. None of that is true, and here Augustine really has a major breakthrough. So what's happening in his life? He's really moving away from the kind of the superstitious beliefs of the Manichees, and he is kind of slowly moving towards the church and towards Christ, but he's not that close. At this point in his life, he's just really struggling with knowing. How can I know something to be true? In some ways, book 6 is on what we call in philosophy epistemology. How can I know something? It's like the science of knowing in general. The first thing I'll point out is how Augustine realizes that there's ways of knowing things, truly knowing things, beyond simply like mathematical knowledge. So in book 4, he says, "For I had not reached the point of madness, which denies that even this can be known, but I wanted to know other things as clearly as this, such as material things as that were not present to my senses, or spiritual things which I did not know how to conceive save corporally." The this he's talking about there is like empirically verifiable scientific data, or like 7 + 3 = 10. I want to know everything that way. But what he realizes, it just doesn't work that way. Fast forward to chapter 5 of book 6, and he says, "I began to consider the countless things I believed which I had not seen, or which had happened with me not there. So many things in the history of nations, so many facts about places and cities which I had never seen. So many things told me by friends, by doctors, by this man, by that man. And unless we accepted these things, we should do nothing at all in this life." Now, that is so true, and it's so basic. In philosophy, what that's kind of called, it's called it's like the sociology of cognition. It means there's a social dimension to knowing anything. Very few things of what we know we actually like do scientific experimentation on. Think of like language, right? To have a concept, I need words. Where did I get my words from? I got them from my mom and my family. I believe that YouTube is a business in San Francisco. Well, I have no trouble giving assent to that, but I have friends who have been to the YouTube offices, but I've never been there. But nonetheless, I've got enough like data in my mind to say, yeah, YouTube is a real business in San Francisco. Why does that matter for Augustine? Because he's moving to a place where he sees that knowing in general for human beings is pretty complex. And especially when you're dealing with something like knowing spiritual things, knowing true wisdom, above all knowing God. Part of the complexity for Augustine of knowing anything at all is that it's not just like an angel knows things, like your mind just kind of does these mathematical things in your head, or just these pure rational things but in some sense your body is involved. If you want to learn more about Augustine's like deep thinking on this, check out John Henry Newman's amazing book, An Essay in Aid of a Grammar of Assent. The grammar of assent is where he opens this up. So for example, your body's involved in what you know. So when people read this book, they're like, why is Augustine so hung up on sexual issues? Well, I thought his main concern was knowing truth and knowing wisdom. What in the world does having sexual lust have anything to do with? Well, see, for Augustine, you're a body and a soul. You're one person. And that your will plays a role in what you know. Your will gives assent. So for example, if your will is constantly doing vicious things, it's choosing bad things, then your intellect is giving assent to things that are untrue. And that's a problem for your intellect. Your intellect is getting stupider. Now flip it around though. If your will is in the habit of choosing good things, then when your mind sees something as true, your will is going to be able to say, I give assent to that. At this point in Augustine's life, he's hanging out with Ambrose. He's starting to spend time with Ambrose, and that plays a big role. Sometimes for me, as a priest, moms and dads will say, hey, my kids are going off to college, and what books should I send them? And I say definitely send them good Catholic books, but pray that they hang out with good Catholic people, with smart Catholic people. because the people you hang out with really, really matters. Augustine says, most strongly of all, it struck me how firmly and unshakably I believed that I was born of a particular father and mother, which I could not possibly know unless I believed it upon the word of others, right? You were a baby. You weren't there when you can't remember when you were born. So it's true of all of us. If that's true of the knowledge, your ability to say, I truly know who my mom and dad are, you just keep going, right? That's how the human intellect works. There's different modes of knowing. Mathematical knowledge is one tiny little kind of human knowing, but the vast majority of human knowing involves a much more complex coming together of different converging lines of probabilities. And then the human soul takes that all together and then at some point says, that's true. That's where Augustine's going. So later in this chapter, he has this experience where he sees a drunk guy. He's walking around Milan, he sees a drunk guy. And he realizes, that drunk guy is happier than I am right now because he got what he wanted. All he wanted to do was get drunk, and now he's happier than me. What Augustine wants is wisdom, and he can't get it. Now, Augustine will realize the guy's going to wake up with a hangover, that he's not going to be happy anymore. But that experience was really important for Augustine because he realized, I need to take a look at what's really going to make me happy. I don't want to get just some intellectual hangover. The payoff for this is two things. One, I would say for ourselves, right? To know God, to want to understand the world around us. It takes hard work. We learn through this whole process of friends and growing in virtue and avoiding vice and having listening to music and reading books and watching movies, and that's all part of knowing things. So it's engage all that multiplicity of how to know things. The second thing I think is be patient with other people, right? People in your life who you want to know God or know the faith or go back to church or whatever. You don't give up on them, you don't despair, but you want to be patient with them. There's a great line from John Henry Newman himself, which picks up what Augustine's getting at in Book 6, I think. He says, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. It's dead right, isn't it, right? It's not your intellect alone. It's your intellect in harmony with your will. Your will, like one leg, and your intellect the other leg. And your will is giving permission for you to say, yeah, this is true, and I'm going to move forward with this truth. So anyway, Book 6, so far one of my favorite books because it really goes deep into how we know things, how complex the human act of knowing anything is. But I think it gives a lot of hope for people who want to grow in faith and want people around them to grow in faith. Love to know what you think about Book 6. Thanks for hanging out with us at Catholic Breakfast.